romper room where we ball a break. Big wins, big losses, all at stake. Party vibe, poker life, always crunk. Feel rich, feel broke, that's just the funk, yeah. Seen boys rise, seen boys fall. Bluffing stacks, risking it all. Got the queens, thought I locked the pot. Straight flush flip, now I'm feeling shot. It's the hustle, it's the grind, no time to assume. All in a faux life in the romper room.
Welcome back to the Romper Room Poker Podcast. You know, something that I think about a lot is how much of a difference a strong mental game makes in poker. It doesn't matter if you're in like a big tournament or just grinding out cash games.
Yeah.
Your mindset can really be the deciding factor between, you know, walking away with a pile of chips or going bust.
Yeah, that's so true.
Right.
I'd argue that, like, as you climb the ranks and you're facing tougher competition, the mental game becomes even more crucial than the technical skills.
Yeah, because everyone at the higher levels knows the odds and has solid strategies.
Right.
But what separates the truly great players is their ability to stay calm under pressure, to read their opponents accurately.
Absolutely.
And avoid those costly mental mistakes that we all make.
To help us really break down the mental game, we are going to be tapping into the wisdom of Jared Tendler.
Yes.
This guy has coached over 300 pro players.
Wow.
So he knows a thing or two about what it takes to succeed in poker.
His work is fascinating. And what I find really cool is how he breaks down these complex psychological concepts into practical, actionable advice.
Absolutely.
It's not just about vague ideas like think positive.
Right.
It's about having a game plan for your mind.
Yeah.
Just like you do for your hands.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
One of the things that Tendler focuses on is something every poker player has to deal with.
Yeah.
Tilt.
Tilt.
We've all been there, right?
Oh, yeah.
You take a bad beat,
Yeah.
or things just aren't going your way, and suddenly you're feeling that rage building up.
I have definitely felt that heat more than a few times. It's like your brain just short circuits.
It does.
And you start making decisions you wouldn't even consider when you're level-headed.
Exactly. And Tendler doesn't just talk about tilt in general.
Okay.
He identifies 7 distinct types of tilt.
7.
Each with its own triggers and consequences.
Okay.
For example, have you ever experienced injustice tilt?
Injustice tilt. I feel like I am experiencing that right now.
Yeah.
Just kidding. But yeah, I know that feeling. It's like when you get a string of terrible hands.
Yeah.
Or you run into coolers over and over again.
Yeah.
And you start to feel like the poker gods are personally out to get you.
That's it. It's that sense that the game itself is unfair. And you're being cheated somehow. It's not just about losing.
Yeah.
It's about feeling wronged by the very nature of poker.
And when that happens, it's so hard to stay rational.
Oh, yeah.
You start blaming everything but yourself.
Yeah.
And that's when the really bad decisions start coming in.
Tendler emphasizes that even small amounts of tilt, the kind you might not even be fully aware of, can have a huge negative impact on your game.
Wow.
It's like a slow leak in your mental game, gradually draining your chips and your confidence.
It's insidious, right? Because it's not always this big explosive meltdown.
Right.
Sometimes it's just a subtle shift in your mindset.
Yeah.
And you don't even realize it's happening until you've already made a bunch of costly mistakes.
That's why it's so important to be aware of the different types of tilt and their triggers.
Okay.
Once you can recognize the early warning signs, you can start to develop strategies for managing them before they take over.
So instead of just saying don't tilt,
Right.
Tendler gives you like a roadmap.
He does.
For actually identifying and addressing the root causes of tilt in your own game.
Absolutely.
I love that about his approach.
Me too.
And here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
Tendler actually argues that tilt can be a good thing in a weird way.
He does.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Did you just say tilt can be good? I thought we were trying to avoid it at all costs.
We are, but hear me out.
Okay.
Tendler's point is that tilt acts like a spotlight, highlighting the weak points in your strategy.
Okay.
The mistakes you make when you're tilted often reveal the areas you need to work on when you're calm and collected.
So it's like tilt is giving you this brutal feedback.
It is.
Saying, hey, you're vulnerable here. Fix this.
Exactly. It's like getting a poker coach who only shows up when you're playing your worst. Brutal, yes, but potentially very insightful if you know how to use that information.
So it's not just about suppressing tilt.
Right.
It's about using it as a tool for self-improvement.
Exactly.
That's a really powerful concept.
And speaking of self-improvement, if you're looking for resources and guidance on your poker journey,
Yes.
Don't forget to check out romperroompoker.com.
Yeah.
We've got tons of articles, videos, and coaching options to help you take your game to the next level.
Absolutely. We're all about helping you become the best poker player you can be,
Right.
both mentally and strategically.
Yes.
Now, I'm curious,
Yeah.
does Tendler offer any specific strategies for dealing with tilt once you've identified it?
He does. There's quite a bit he suggests.
Yep.
One strategy I find particularly helpful is what he calls the tilt breaker.
The tilt breaker.
It's basically a pre-planned routine you can use to interrupt the tilt spiral before it spins out of control.
That sounds really useful.
Yeah.
Could you give an example of what a tilt breaker might look like?
Sure. Imagine you're playing online
Okay.
and you get sucked out on for the third time in a row.
Yep.
You feel that familiar rage starting to build.
Yeah.
Instead of letting it take over,
Yeah.
you immediately activate your tilt breaker.
Okay. So what does that involve? Do you stand up and do jumping jacks? Scream into a pillow?
Well, it could be physical activity, but it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
The key is to break the pattern of thoughts and feelings that are fueling the tilt.
Right.
So you might step away from the computer for a few minutes, take some deep breaths,
Yeah.
listen to calming music, or even just focus on something completely unrelated to poker.
It's like hitting the reset button on your mental state.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The goal is to interrupt that negative spiral and give yourself a chance to calm down and regain control. It might also be a good time to remind yourself to take a break from the game if things are really getting out of hand.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best move is to just step away from the table altogether, But tilt isn't the only emotion that can sabotage our poker game.
Right.
There's another sneaky culprit
Yeah.
that we might not always recognize as a problem.
Fear.
You're right. Fear might not seem as obvious
Right.
or as explosive as tilt,
Yeah.
but it can be just as damaging in the long run. It can manifest in all sorts of subtle ways
Yeah.
that affect our decisions and our overall performance.
And I think we're going to get into that
We are.
right after a quick word from our sponsors.
Stick with us. You won't want to miss this.
Definitely. When we think about fear in poker,
Yeah.
it might not be as dramatic as, say, a fear of sharks while swimming in the ocean,
Right.
but those subtle anxieties can really mess with our decision-making at the table.
Yeah. I think it's easy to downplay it
Yeah,
because it's not always this big paralyzing fear.
it's not.
It's often more subtle, like
Yeah.
hesitation, second-guessing yourself, or maybe even rushing a decision
Right.
because you're afraid of making the wrong move.
That's fear creeping into your decision-making process.
Yeah.
And the thing is, fear doesn't always lead to overly cautious plays. Sometimes it can make you overly aggressive.
Really? How so?
Well, think about it. If you're afraid of losing,
Yeah.
you might start making reckless bluffs or chasing improbable draws
Yeah.
just to avoid folding and admitting defeat.
So it's like your fear is driving you to make these desperate moves,
It is.
even when you know deep down they're not the right ones.
Tendler talks about how fear can show up in a bunch of different ways. We've talked about second-guessing and rushing decisions.
Yeah.
But have you ever noticed yourself constantly replaying past hands in your head?
Oh, man, all the time.
Especially those where you made a mistake.
It's like a mental highlight reel
It is.
of all my worst beats and blunders. I can't seem to shake them off,
Right.
even when I'm trying to focus on the current hand.
That's a classic sign of fear. You're dwelling on the past
Hmm.
because you're afraid of making those same mistakes again.
Right.
And guess what? That kind of obsessive thinking takes you right out of the present moment. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Making it harder to make clear-headed decisions in the current hand.
It's like you're playing scared poker.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting and kind of scary, to be honest.
Okay.
Tendler says fear can literally make your mind go blank in crucial moments.
Seriously. You're telling me that in the middle of a big hand, with all the pressure on, my brain could just decide to check out.
It happens.
That's terrifying.
It might sound extreme, but it happens more often than you think.
Yeah.
Imagine you're in a big pot, the action's on you, and suddenly you feel this overwhelming pressure, like everyone's watching and judging every move you make.
Right.
Your heart starts racing, your palms get sweaty,
Yeah.
and your mind just goes blank.
Wow.
You can't remember your strategy, you can't read your opponent,
Right.
and you end up making a completely irrational decision.
It's like stage fright, but with cards and chips instead of a spotlight.
Exactly. And just like stage fright, fear in poker can be overcome.
Yeah. With the right techniques and mental training. But before we delve into those techniques, let's shift gears and talk about something a little more positive. Something every poker player dreams of. The zone.
Ah, yes, the zone. It's that magical state where everything just clicks. You're reading opponents like open books.
You are.
Your bluffs are working flawlessly. The chips are piling up. It's like you're playing on autopilot,
Right.
but it's the best poker you've ever played.
Tendler describes the zone as a state of flow where skill and instinct merge seamlessly. And what's really cool is that he doesn't believe it's just some random mystical experience.
Right.
He believes we can actually train ourselves to access the zone more consistently.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me there's a science to achieving poker nirvana?
Yeah.
I thought it was all about luck and maybe a four-leaf clover tucked in your pocket.
Luck definitely plays a role in poker.
Sure.
But Tendler highlights key factors that contribute to getting into the zone, and those factors are within our control. One of the most important factors is energy levels.
Okay, energy levels.
Yeah.
So like making sure I've had my morning coffee before sitting down at the table.
Well, physical energy is definitely important.
Okay.
Getting enough sleep, eating healthy foods, and even exercising regularly can all impact your mental clarity and stamina at the table.
Right.
But it goes beyond that.
Okay.
We also need to manage our mental and emotional energy.
So if I'm feeling burned out
Yes.
or stressed from work or life in general,
Yeah.
that's going to affect my ability to get into the zone.
Absolutely. If you're carrying baggage from a tough day or you're mentally exhausted from multi-tabling for hours on end,
Yeah.
it's going to be a lot harder to reach that state of peak performance where everything flows effortlessly. Remember that performance stress curve we talked about earlier?
Yeah, I remember like you need to find that sweet spot of arousal,
You do.
not too high and not too low,
Right?
where you're alert and focused but not overwhelmed.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key factor in reaching the zone. Goals. Now, you might be thinking, of course, goals are important. I want to win money.
Right. Of course.
But Tendler is talking about a specific type of goal.
Okay.
He warns against getting too fixated on results-oriented goals, like winning a certain amount of money or making the final table of a tournament.
So it's not just about the destination. It's about the journey.
Right.
Sounds kind of deep for a poker podcast, but I'm intrigued.
Well, poker is a deeply psychological game. What Tendler suggests is that we should focus more on process-oriented goals.
Okay.
These are goals that are within our control regardless of the outcome of any particular hand or session.
Could you give an example of a process-oriented goal?
Sure. Instead of saying, I'm going to win this tournament,
Yeah.
you could say, I'm going to make the best decision I can in every hand based on the information available to me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe your goal is, I'm going to successfully identify and manage my tilt triggers throughout this session.
Okay, I see the difference. With process-oriented goals, you're focusing on the things you can directly control, like your decision-making process, your emotional state, and your overall approach to the game.
Exactly. And the beauty of this approach is that it helps you stay motivated and focused even when the cards aren't falling your way. Because even if you're losing, you can still feel good about yourself if you know you're sticking to your process and making the best decisions you can.
It takes the pressure off the outcome and allows you to focus on what you can actually influence.
It does.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of influence, let's talk about something that's fundamental to improvement in any area of life, and that's learning FOBR. Tendler suggests that a lot of mental game struggles stem from not knowing how to learn effectively. How does that play out in the poker world?
It's like this. You can watch all the strategy videos, read all the books, attend all the webinars,
Right.
but if you're not able to apply that knowledge effectively at the table, it's not going to translate into results.
So it's like knowing all the right notes, but not being able to play the song.
Yes.
You have all this theoretical knowledge,
Yes.
but no practical application.
A perfect analogy. Tendler breaks down the learning process into 4 distinct stages,
Okay.
starting with unconscious incompetence.
Unconscious incompetence. It sounds like me before I discovered the Romper Room Poker podcast. Just kidding. But seriously, what does that mean?
It basically means you don't even know what you don't know.
Okay.
You're clueless about your own weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
Then comes conscious incompetence.
Okay.
This is where you start to become aware of the areas where you need to improve.
So it's like you're finally realizing that you don't know everything,
Yes.
that there are gaps in your knowledge and skills.
And this can be a painful stage.
Yeah.
But it's also where the real learning begins.
Okay.
Once you acknowledge your weaknesses, you
Yeah.
can start to address them.
It's like admitting you're lost before you can find your way.
Precisely. The third stage is conscious competence. This is where you actively work on improving those weaknesses
Right.
through practice, study, and deliberate effort.
So you're putting in the work. You're making progress.
You are.
But it still requires conscious effort. It's not yet second nature.
Right. And finally, you reach the fourth stage, unconscious competence. This is the holy grail of learning, where the skill becomes so ingrained
Yeah.
that you can perform it almost effortlessly.
It's like those poker pros who can make split-second decisions without even seeming to think about it.
Exactly. They've reached a level of mastery where the thought process is so automated that it appears almost instinctual.
That's an inspiring thought. But how do we actually apply this learning framework to the mental game of poker? Are we supposed to be taking quizzes after each session or something?
Not quite. It all starts with self-awareness. Tendler encourages players to keep a poker journal where they track their mental game alongside their hand histories.
Okay.
After each session, take some time to reflect on how you felt. What tilted you, what decisions you struggled with,
Right.
and what areas you need to work on.
It's like being your own poker therapist.
In a way, yes. By analyzing your thoughts and feelings, you can start to identify patterns and triggers that are impacting your game. For example, maybe you notice that you consistently tilt when you're playing against aggressive players. Or maybe you realize that you tend to make impulsive decisions when you're tired.
It's like doing a SWOT analysis on your mental game.
Yeah.
You're identifying your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then you can use that information to create a personalized learning plan.
Exactly. And that's where all those resources we mentioned at romperroompoker.com can come in handy. We've got articles and videos on everything from managing tilt to improving focus to developing a winning mindset.
It's like having a mental game toolkit at your fingertips.
It is.
You can choose the tools and techniques that best address your individual needs and challenges.
And the best part is that the learning process is ongoing. It's not like you reach a certain level of mastery and then you're done. There's always something new to learn, something new to improve, something new to discover about yourself and your game.
And isn't that part of the fun of poker? It's a game that constantly challenges us to grow and evolve.
Absolutely. But before we get too philosophical here, I want to talk about another crucial aspect of learning, and that's the difference between making mistakes due to lack of knowledge and making mistakes due to a breakdown in your decision-making process.
Okay, I'm curious about this. What's the distinction there?
It's subtle but important.
Yeah.
Let's say you misplay a hand
Okay.
because you simply didn't know the correct odds or strategy.
Right.
That's a lack of knowledge, and the solution is straightforward. Study, learn, and fill that knowledge gap. But what if you misplay a hand even though you knew the correct play?
That's happened to me more times than I care to admit. It's like knowing the answer to a test question but choosing the wrong one anyway.
Exactly. That's a sign that something else is interfering with your decision-making process. It could be tilt, fear, fatigue, distractions, or any number of factors.
So it's not just about knowing what to do.
It's not.
It's about being able to execute under pressure.
Exactly. And Tendler suggests that we need to analyze not just what decisions we make,
Right.
but also how we make them. Do we have a clear process for analyzing information,
Yeah.
weighing options,
Right.
and arriving at a decision? Or do we tend to make impulsive or emotionally driven choices? And that brings us to the final topic we need to explore.
Focus.
Yeah.
We're just talking about the importance of focus, and I think, it's something that's easy to overlook.
Yeah.
Especially in a game like poker where there's so much going on around you.
Right, we got the cards, the chips, the other players, the dealer, maybe you have TV in the background.
Yeah.
And these days, almost everyone has their phone buzzing with notifications.
Oh, yeah.
It's a recipe for distraction.
And if we're not careful, all that noise can really drown out the signal.
It can.
We miss important Right. We make careless mistakes,
Yeah.
and our overall game suffers.
Tendler has a really interesting perspective on focus. He describes it as the primary tool for gathering data.
Data gathering, that sounds very analytical.
It is.
Almost scientific.
Think about it. Every hand, every opponent's action, every subtle change in their demeanor, every card that hits the felt, it's all data. And if our focus is sharp, we can process that data effectively and make informed decisions. But if our focus is scattered, we miss crucial pieces of the puzzle.
So it's like trying to play poker with blurry vision.
Yeah.
You might see the basic outlines, but you're missing all the important details.
Exactly. And in today's hyper-connected world, distractions are everywhere.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get sidetracked.
Oh, it is.
Especially when you're playing online where
Yeah.
you have multiple tables open, social media feeds, and
Yeah.
instant access to a whole universe of entertainment just a click away.
I can definitely relate to that. It's like a constant battle to stay focused on the game when there's so much else vying for your attention.
And the worst part is that it's not just about the present moment. A lack of focus can actually hinder your long-term growth as a poker player.
How so? Is it like missing out on valuable study time?
It's even deeper than that.
Okay.
Every missed observation, every moment of inattention is a lost opportunity to learn and refine your skills. It's like a detective missing crucial clues at a crime scene because they're too busy checking their phone.
So focus isn't just about winning the next hand. It's about building a foundation for future success.
Exactly. The more focused you are, the more you can absorb, analyze, and integrate into your game.
Okay, so we know focus is important, but what are some of the main culprits that sabotage our focus?
Tendler points to a few key factors. One is boredom. If the game isn't challenging enough, or if we're playing too many hands on autopilot, our minds tend to wander.
Yeah, I've definitely caught myself daydreaming at the table when the action is slow.
Yeah.
Or when I'm playing against weaker opponents.
Yeah. Another culprit is distractibility. This is where all those external distractions come in: the phones, the TVs, the chatty players at the next table. But it's also about our internal distractions. Those thoughts and worries that keep popping up in our minds, taking us out of the game.
It's like having a mental popcorn machine going off in your head.
And then there's something that might seem a little surprising. Burnout.
Burnout, I thought that was more of a physical thing.
Yeah.
Like when you've been working too hard or exercising too much.
It can be physical, but it also has a huge mental component. When we're mentally exhausted, our focus wanes, our decision-making suffers, and we become more susceptible to tilt and other mental game gremlins. It's like trying to run a marathon on an empty stomach.
Okay, that's a vivid analogy. I know when I'm feeling burned out, it's almost impossible to play my A game.
Yeah.
My mind just isn't sharp enough to make those quick, calculated decisions.
Tendler also talks about how conflicting goals can drain our focus. For example, if we're playing poker, but we're also thinking about work deadlines, relationship issues.
Right.
Or financial worries, our minds are divided and our energy is scattered.
I know that feeling all too well. It's like there's a little devil on my shoulder whispering, hey, check your email instead of focusing on this hand. You can always win it back later.
We all have those internal battles. And the thing is, self-discipline isn't about becoming some stoic, emotionless robot.
Right.
It's about aligning your actions with your goals.
Yeah.
If your goal is to play your best poker, then you need to create an environment and a mindset that supports that goal.
So it's about choosing what matters most in the long run.
It is.
Even if it means sacrificing some short-term gratification. Easier said than done, but definitely worth striving for.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the final piece of the mental game puzzle we're going to discuss today. Mental endurance. Just like a marathon runner trains their body to withstand physical exertion, poker players need to train their minds to endure long sessions and withstand pressure without their game falling apart.
So it's about building mental stamina. Does that mean meditating for hours or doing brain puzzles? Those can be helpful tools, but Tendler suggests a more practical approach. Start by honestly assessing your current mental capacity. How long can you play at a high level without your game deteriorating?
So it's about knowing your limits and then gradually pushing them.
Exactly. Don't expect to suddenly jump from playing 2-hour sessions to grinding for 12 hours straight.
Right.
It's a process of gradual improvement. And here's a key insight from Tendler. Mental endurance is closely linked to automation.
Automation, like robots playing poker.
Not quite. It's about automating the more routine aspects of your game.
Okay.
Like calculating pot odds, recognizing bet sizing tells, or making basic pre-flop decisions. The more you can automate these fundamental skills, the less mental energy you expend on them, freeing up your mind to focus on higher-level strategy and decision-making.
So it's like having a mental autopilot for the routine stuff.
Exactly. This allows you to conserve energy and stay sharp for longer durations, which is crucial for those grueling multi-day tournaments or those marathon cash game sessions.
It's all starting to come together now. It's not just about knowing poker strategy. It's about having the mental fortitude to execute that strategy effectively, even when you're tired, stressed, or facing tough opponents.
And that's what separates the good players from the great players. It's not just about talent or luck. It's about having a strong mental game that allows you to perform at your best when it matters most.
Wow, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. We've covered so much ground today, from tilt to the zone, learning focus, and mental endurance. I feel like I've got a whole new toolkit for approaching the mental game of poker.
Me too.
And remember, if you're looking for more guidance and support on your poker journey, don't forget to visit us at romperroompoker.com.
Yes.
We've got tons of resources, coaching options, and a supportive community to help you take your game to the next level.
Absolutely.
Until next time, good luck at the tables, and may your minds be sharp, your focus unwavering, and your tilt forever tamed.